Okay, I'd like to start our occasion by honoring Rupert and Jeanette Costo's legacy of cultivating an indigenous bodily, archival, and epistemological presence at the UC Riverside campus. The Cahuilla, Tongva, Luiseño, Serrano peoples are the original, surviving, and persistent human caretakers of the land, water, and air that is occupied by the University of California. This territory has never been ceded, just as indigenous sovereignty and self-determination have not been surrendered. UCR is inhabited by Indigenous, Aboriginal, and First Nations peoples from all over the world, many of whom are among our faculty, students, and staff. UC Riverside is mere blocks away from the place where the Riverside Police Department stole the life of 19-year-old Taisha Miller in 1998, a reminder that this institution and the University of California generally have a long history of proximity to and active complicity in anti-Black state and state-condoned violence. So it's with a sense of humble gratitude and urgent obligation that I ask us to confront the conditions that surround and permeate this gathering. I look forward to continuing to work with many of you to decolonize this world and to create possibilities for abolitionists' thriving thought and creativity. Welcome, everyone. My name is Dylan Rodriguez. I'm serving in the capacity as co-director for the Center for Ideas of the Center for Ideas in Society. I use he, him pronouns, and just some caretaking for this event. It is being recorded. Transcription, there should be a live transcription option available on the interface at the bottom of your Zoom app. And in discussion with thank you, Ayana. Now it's enabled, folks. Live transcription is now enabled. Thank you, Ayana. And in conversation with the organizers of this forum, the Black Study Initiative Committee, if there are any requests to momentarily stop recording because you want to ask a question or get into a discussion that's particularly sensitive and you don't want it to be on the record and you don't want it posted, just say so, and I'll be happy to pause the recording so that you're not on the record. But just be aware of that and feel free to just say so. So I want to welcome everybody to this open forum, to this kind of a final discussion of the proposal for Department of Black Study. This is part of the Decolonizing Humanism programming stream at the Center for Ideas in Society. And the committee has offered me an opportunity to make just a brief opening comment to contextualize this important conversation and event. So I very much appreciate that, you all. I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to open things up. So let me start with this, because I know that there's been some backlash about this. I'll be really explicit about that. The Center for Ideas in Society, of course, does not and cannot endorse specific Senate proposals. Fine, okay? Let's make that very upfront and obvious to everybody. The Center for Ideas in Society does neither endorses nor can it endorse a particular Senate proposal. Boom. However, I believe that I'm at liberty to talk to you all as a colleague and as a 21-year veteran faculty member at this campus to offer my own individual, unequivocal support for the Department of Black Study proposal. I'm confident that I might even have the liberty, the right, and the entitlement as a colleague and 21-year faculty member at this campus to offer my own individual, unequivocal urging that all UCR Senate faculty members log on to the upcoming Senate division meeting from 1 to 3 p.m. this coming Tuesday, May 24, to vote on the Department of Black Study proposal. So I'm saying that as an individual. I'm not saying that on behalf of the center. I say this because your vote, all Senate faculty who will be voting on this, your vote on this proposal will determine whether the enduring leadership, the rigorous intellectual leadership of Black students, Black faculty, and Black staff will culminate in the creation of a unique scholarly department that has the immediate potential to boost UCR's profile as a research institution at a national and global scale. Those are the stakes. So as I prepare to open the floor to initial comments by several of the attending members of the Black Study Initiative Committee, I want to continue my opening thought about why this proposal is so vital to the immediate and long-term future of UC Riverside. The creation of a Department of Black Study at UCR addresses a stubbornly under-recognized pillar of what diversity, equity, and inclusion professionals commonly refer to as an unsupportive, hostile, and/or toxic institutional climate that marginalizes and demoralizes so-called underrepresented minority faculty. And that is the last time you'll hear me use that term minority, by the way. I only use it because DEI professionals like to use it. Crucially, this is a framework, this DEI framework tends to obscure and often erase the incommensurable particular forms of marginalization, demoralization, and I will add gendered criminalization that significantly, if not foundationally, define the institutional experiences of many Black faculty and students, Black women identified faculty and students, Black trans faculty and students, Black queer faculty and students, Black international faculty and students, and so on. I feel we need to constantly remind ourselves that the origins of this proposal for a Department of Black Study are in the coalitional solidarity-based organizing of Black students at UCR in the spring quarter of 2020, motivated by the emergence of a global resistance and liberation movement against systemic anti-Black state and police violence, as well as a desire to create a modest, though immensely impactful site within this particular educational institution to serve as a hub of what might be called, and what the committee has called, Black futurity. In my own view, this is clearly at the core of the Department of Black Study proposal. It's a leveraging of scholarship, research, art, creativity, curriculum, community-centered critical intellectual practice, and Black epistemology toward the possibility of creating a space of livability and even thriving for people engaged in the deep dynamic traditions of Black study. So I think it's my responsibility to offer a direct critical comment on another specific embedded institutional problem that the Department of Black Study will address. And I offer this brief critical reflection because I think many of our colleagues and administrators, despite their best intentions, tend to misunderstand or actively repress full identification of the problem because it may implicate their otherwise well-meaning practices. UCR, as with most large research universities, tends to frame Black studies, and by affiliation, our Black colleagues, research, art, and scholarship, as complementary, and thus implicitly marginal features of the university's research profile. One former UCR Provost EDC referred to the scholarship and curriculum of ethnic studies, and by extension, Black studies, as what he called boutique offerings, seemingly unaware of the deep white supremacist and anti-Black coloniality of such a conception of knowledge and scholarship. The tendency I'm criticizing is not limited to intermittent instances and scattered anecdotes. For example, UC and UCR administrative, communications and public relations and development units, those are the fundraisers, often showcase individual Black faculty members and other colleagues from so-called underrepresented demographics in piecemeal, though certainly flattering fashion, through fawning news articles, featured public events, and prominent placement on university web pages. A lot of us have suffered that ourselves, right? Meaning that we've been the ones that they've featured. Yet the consensus among the students and colleagues with whom I am in community is that these institutional exercises tend to be tokenizing and patronizing in their individualization of achievement, what they call achievement, in what might be called institutional exhibitions of multicultural model minorities. These and other institutional practices run the risk of reproducing the marginality of Black scholars and Black studies scholarship, rather than repairing and resolving a persistent systemic problem. So to close, perhaps the most generous contribution of the Department of Black Study proposal is the constructive and transformative way it exceeds the limitations of institutional diversity paradigms by conceptualizing Black thought, Black diasporic epistemologies and archives, and Black creative practices as an active, dynamic, and deeply historical research and curricular infrastructure for this and any public research university. Thank you for indulging my opening comments. I'd like to pass the proverbial mic over to the members of the Black Study Initiative Committee, starting with Ayana. Please quickly introduce yourselves, y'all.
Yes. Hi, everyone. My name is Ayana Omilade Llewellyn. Thank you so much, Dylan, for your opening comments and grounding in this space, especially as someone who has had such a deep impact on this campus and who has just the institutional memory that so many of us turn to and hold. So with the limited amount of time that we do have, I want to quickly just share who everyone is in the group. Folks can wave as I say their names, not everyone is present. And then I will quickly hand it over to Kim to share a bit more about what's blooming and blossoming on our end. So with that being said, we're really grateful to have our committee members for the Black Study Initiative, Aaron Brown, a graduate student in the Department of English, myself, Ayana Omilade Llewellyn, an assistant professor in the Department of Anthropology, Dennis Frederick McIvern, the University Honors and past president of the Black Faculty and Staff Association, Donatella Galel, apologies, Department of Theater, Film, and Digital Production, Amani Kai Johnson, faculty in the Department of Dance, Iskari Noel, Estelle, graduate student in the Department of English, Joao Costa Vargas, department faculty in the Department of Anthropology, John Epps, a minister and local community member, Kimmy Dion, faculty in Department of Political Science, Marilyn Gilbrisk, research associate with UCR Institute for Research on World Systems, Naja Whitson, faculty in the Department of Dance, Precious Fraskin, undergraduate student, former student in UCR, class of 2021, Ricker B. Hines, faculty in the Department of Theater, Film, and Digital Production, and then of course, last but not least, Voris Lynn, faculty in English. So just really wanting to stress so much has, and so many people have poured into this group and the departmentalization efforts since the fall of 2020. And we have all been excited about the upcoming sort of culmination of all of that work with this vote next Tuesday. So with that being said, I will pass it over to Kim. Take it away, Kim.
Thanks, Ayanna. Good morning, everyone. And thanks, Dylan, for inviting us. I shared in the chat a link to the proposal, the revised version of the proposal, so that those of you who haven't had a chance to review it can take a look and kind of know more about what we are imagining. But one thing I wanted to highlight, just having listened to the State of the College event for Chaz, in which there was a question asked about, how would this department get funded? And I know that in this kind of mindset of the university where there's a scarcity mindset and people see potential emergence of new departments as competition for resources. We're not imagining ourselves that way, and in fact we recognize that the university just generally has not necessarily specific to UCR, just kind of generally has underfunded Black study, and so we're seeking to find our own resources and build the future, with that in mind. And so, for example, as part of my work on the committee, together with Marilyn Galbrisk and Joao Costa Vargas and others, collaborating beyond the committee, we applied for and received a UCOP-funded grant to advance faculty diversity, and that was successfully funded to the tune of $500,000 to bring 4 new lines to the university. And there are other activities that we've been doing because we recognize the need for these resources and to support the labor that's really needed to build this department. We also want to share with our colleagues who are here today, and that you can share with others, so that you can encourage them to vote on Tuesday. We see this as just a beginning. We think there's a need for a Department of Black Study, but we also think that Black Study needs to exist in departments around the campus. And we see this grant and the Mellon grant that Dr. Llewellyn is a part of. We see these grants as opportunities to collaborate beyond, and we invite opportunities to collaborate with others in trying to imagine how we can enhance teaching and research on this campus, to include and really to center Black study. So now I'm going to turn it to my colleague, Boris Nunley. Boris, you're muted.
Thank you, Kim. Thanks everyone for attending this morning. We really appreciate it. We know that all of you are very, very busy. And so we do deeply are grateful for your showing up. I'm very, very excited about the Black Study Initiative and Black Study, particularly given the context of what's going on now, on what happened at the church shooting, what happened in Buffalo, and it's very difficult to be aspirational, but this Black Study Initiative and the Black Study Department allows us to be very, very aspirational in the sense that we're moving forward despite all of this and what's going on contextually. And one of the reasons why we can afford to be aspirational is that we've actually hired someone. And the person that we hired, Dr. Elise Ambrose, they identify themselves as a queer ethics ethicist. They are very, very, very invested in what we refer to as the Black radical tradition. And those of you who are here understand that the Black radical tradition isn't one thing, it can be several different things, but what it allows us to do is to ask different questions. And so for them, they are very much invested in Black, trans, non-binary epistemologies, which are fundamental to their work. And they have a very, very imaginative methodology in terms of how they engage Black life, Black aliveness, and Black futurity. And that allows for them and for us to ask different questions and to think about different ways of being, different ways of becoming, and different ways of becoming otherwise. So you have this Black futurity that's really grounded in something because this person, they have actually been hired, they're forward thinking, their pedagogy is very exciting. For example, they talk a lot about neoliberal pedagogy and how they critique it. And so for them, they're not very invested in what some people call inclusion. They're invested in belonging. And for them, belonging is about taking into account both safety and self-care, but also taking into account the kind of productive conflicts that are necessary to growth. So what we have here is this kind of really tangible hire of a bright future of ways of being, questions that we can ask in the future that allows us to be aspirational. And I think it's important to end with, in terms of their work, it's around Black aliveness. In the way that we, in the way that they and I understand Black aliveness, is Black aliveness isn't related to microaggressions or oppressions. Rather, it's about investments in our own ways of being, investments in how we want to go forward in the future. And what I'll end with is it kind of reminds me of funkiness when I think about their work and I think about what's happening with Black Study Initiative. And it makes me think of, that great metaphysicist, George Clinton, who talks about funkiness as that which is so high we can't get over it, so low we can't get under it, so wide we can't get it around it. This is a chance to feel, think, and dance away out of our constrictions. And I think Black Study, as we conceptualize it, and as Dr. Elise Ambrose, as they conceptualize it, it allows us to do that and get out of our own constrictions. So with that, I want to hand the virtual mic over to Aaron Brown.
Hello, everyone. I'm Aaron Brown, a doctoral candidate in the Department of English. I just wanted to spend a couple of moments to quickly discuss my experience on this committee and initiatives in this committee that are centered or focused or geared towards Black graduate and undergraduate life. I think to start off with, I want to uplift and also bring into the room the incredible amount of care that has been offered in this committee for Black graduate students. It has been a really touching and heartwarming experience to see practices of care, practices of calling in, practices of dreaming and imagining that will carry forth in the work that I do in the future. And also will be ever present in the ways that we are imagining a Department of Black Study living on this campus. And so I like to think about not only the sort of structure of this department as one that is like making a real intervention in what has happened, intervention in campus life here at UCR, but like I also like to think of the practice of the people who are developing this department as like a living practice. Like, and so it's something that is the lifeblood of this department. The incredible consideration for Black graduate students and undergraduate students, especially under the really severe and difficult conditions of the last few years, and then also just ever in this country. The kind of work that this committee has done to bring that into the forefront has been really incredible. We've hosted a number of different forums where we've gotten the opportunity to listen to graduate students and undergraduate students talk about and express their needs. And not only was that really transformative in the moment, because there are not a lot of spaces where Black graduate and undergraduate students, especially in front of people who hold various positions of power in the institution, can just be transparent about their lived experience. But it's also really valuable and important to the way that it's been really valuable and important to the way that the committee has really been intentional about their steps towards making things, towards uplifting the futurity of Black life here on this campus. I myself have felt that the thoughts, ideas, needs, and needs that have been present for me have been really taken seriously on this committee, as well as have seen in practice people on this committee really immediately integrate the thoughts, suggestions, opinions of my colleagues, as well as undergraduate students. And also really, even in those moments where people are attempting to have like, or we are cultivating this really transparent and radically honest space where students can talk about their work. It's like teaching. I've seen this committee really push teaching people how to talk about in really honest terms what their needs are, which can often be difficult for graduate and undergraduate students, especially when there's so much at risk, right? And there's such an intense power dynamic attached to that. And so the incredible amount of care around the development of this department has been really moving for me. And the intervention and the possibility to exist and its life at UCR, I think, is something that I can't put into words. And so thank you. I believe and so on that note, I want to pass it on to, I believe the next person is Marilyn. And so thank you.
Hi, thank you everyone for coming today. As Boris mentioned, it is, everyone's super busy right now, but this is incredibly important. I wanted to talk a little bit about the curriculum that we came up with as a committee, which was, we put in an incredible amount of work into it. And we created a subcommittee within a Black Studies initiative to create this curriculum. It is, of course, a curriculum of Black study. That means it is engaged in embodied practice of teaching and research. It is both local, communal, planetary, historical, contemporary, and very future-oriented, as all my colleagues have mentioned. It is transdisciplinary, and it is anchored in intersectional lens, right? And it engages very seriously with Black epistemologies, metaphysics, temporality, and Black social, cultural, and spiritual life. And of course, Boris mentioned earlier that it is articulated in the Black radical traditions. I wanted to also say that the students who are getting a bachelor's degree, and I am speaking this out because I believe that this proposal will pass in the Senate. Each of you are going to vote positively for this. The students will engage in both research and praxis. And we've come up with a very rigorous program that focuses on the major social factors and movements impacting Black people on the African continent and its diasporas. And so we've created a curriculum around 5 themes. One, critical theories and practices of gender, sexuality, race, and Blackness, performance, arts, and literature, his, her story, behavioral sciences and behavioral and social sciences, law, education, health, environment, STEM, and also social activism and policy. And I want to emphasize this is something that we think of as a highly collaborative program, and it has space for us to, across disciplines, across colleges, to collaborate in terms of the curriculum, in terms of the research. It is extremely, as I said before, rigorous and is future oriented. There's a lot in the proposal for the program for the bachelor's degree. We have it available in the proposal for you to look at very closely. We have come up with also some amazing courses, including a senior capstone project that I think is really, it centers and values the things that everyone has talked about so far. It is a I'm going to talk a little bit about it because I think when we envisioned the Department of Black Study and the bachelor's degree, we wanted it to be both research and also praxis. It involves the arts and involves the sciences, whatever way that we describe as, and the humanities. And our senior capstone project is both of those at the same time, and it is a 2-quarter capstone project. There's a lot that you can read in the program, in the program for the bachelor's degree, and I will let you get a chance to look at the proposal when you get a chance to do so. And so I think at this point, we are going to open up for questions. One other thing I did want to highlight is that Kim talked a little bit about the funding that we received from UCOP. And I wanted to note that it is a signal to all of you that the institution and UCOP and the University of California broadly supports this. And we have felt a lot of support, at least at the University of California, at the Office of the President's level, that they really support this, this Department of Black Study. As you heard, Boris talked about the joint hire in Black study and in religious studies. This is supported by this fund, this grant that was awarded last year. Also, Kim may or may not have mentioned, I was kind of thinking about all the things I wanted to say, but Kim may have mentioned also that we are also in the process of hiring a joint person, a faculty member in politics and Black study. So it really is going in the place that we want to. The hire in religious studies and Black study is amazing. And so anywho, I will open up the floor for questions. Please feel free to put it in the chat and also raise your hand and we will try to answer all your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, BSI committee. So I'm going to work as our facilitator, and I'm just going to ask that people either script out your question in the chat if you prefer not to ask it, live. If you just want to use your raise hand function, feel free to do that, or use the chat to just request the opportunity to ask a question or make a comment. With 35 scholars and thinkers here, I feel like there should be about 1,000 questions. There we go. Go ahead, Professor Jody Kim.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for your crucial and important work on this. I have two very concrete questions about pragmatics and process. The first is, once it passes in our divisional Senate, what else would need to happen for the departmentalization to be achieved? And once it is achieved, on the staff side of things, speaking as someone who's been here at UCR almost as long as Dylan, it's my 18th year here. And for as long as I've been here, there have been staff challenges in the interdisciplinary units. We got downsized into a financial and administrative cluster called the MDU, the infamous MDU at this point. And so I'm wondering if you've had any strategic discussions about whether it would make sense for Black Study not to be placed in the MDU, given the long-running staff crisis that really has not been addressed.
Thank you. So we have two adjoined questions there. First, what happens next after presuming that the proposal passes? And then secondly, how are we going to deal with the ongoing staff challenges, staff infrastructure challenges at UCR and in Chaz in particular? Kim, I think you're about to speak. Thank you.
So thanks for that question, Jody. We're still trying to understand what that process is going to look like. So we received we were CC'd on a letter that Dean Darrell Williams has sent in support of the creation of this department. And in that letter, he suggests that following the successful creation of this department, it would be part of MDU. Now that's a different strategy than the one that was proposed by interim Dean Juliet McMullen when she created and formed the BSI and did some analysis of the financials and also recognized the challenges in the MDU and how rather than putting a new department in, that there needed to be a creation of another unit. And maybe in that new unit, any new departments would be there, but also kind of relieving the stress in MDU and allowing some of the departments that are under that umbrella. I understand that Dean Williams is not following that path. And of course, I think he's the only one who has the power to make that decision. And so I think it's going to be incumbent on us, not just folks who would be within the Department of Black Study, but particularly others in Chaz, and especially those who are in MDU and are facing those challenges on a daily basis to make it apparent how necessary additional staffing and potentially a creation of a new unit is. There's going to be a lot of bureaucratic needs for staffing, but faculty staffing, and right now our focus is on turning out the vote on Tuesday to make sure that our future is a reality. And but we've already thought through just among ourselves, okay, well, these are the courses that we would need to teach in order for the bachelor's degree to hit the ground running. So then, how can we do that, and what arrangements will we need to make within, with our existing departments, and how would we do that? And I think we've made a lot of progress on that, though I won't get into the details of that, but we have been thinking through, because we're all operating with the belief that we're gonna be successful on Tuesday. Of course, that really depends on all of you showing up and helping us to make that happen.
Anyone else from the committee want to respond to Jody's two questions before I move to the question that just came up in chat? Marilyn's applauding. I thought that was a raised hand for a second. Uti Tofan, I hope I'm not totally butchering your name. Would you like to ask the question live?
Yes. First of all, sorry for showing up late. I was having internet challenges. But I must say, the moment I received this email of this whole project, there was something that I can't really name that came across to me as a consciousness. And it was due to the fact that my journey as a student interested in Black studies in UCR had to a certain extent been defined by isolation. Isolation, not because there wasn't a community of scholars who were, interested in my work, but people who could actually speak to the specificities of issues I'm interested in were few and far between. In fact, I had to find community elsewhere. So that's is in a way of saying that as a grad student, I am totally invested in finding out to what extent grad students can participate in this whole project. And this is because, to the extent possible, I know there are graduate students coming in my wake who are interested in doing Black Studies, African literature. I would not want them to encounter a similar thing like I had. My story worked out well in the end, thanks to but yeah, it wasn't as smooth a journey. Which these departments will be the ultimate answer to that question. So what can grad students like myself interested in contributing to? Sorry for the long epigraph.
Not at all. Not at all. Not to repeat Kim, but Kim, you just put something in chat, so maybe you could just restate that out loud for us.
Just for those of you who are not voting members of the Academic Senate, if you support our proposal, we would appreciate if you could, on our behalf, reach out to those members of the Academic Senate that you know and are close to, and encourage them to participate in Tuesday's vote and to make that a reality. And I'll type a few more things in the chat as well, but I'll invite my colleagues to share as well.
Other members of the committee would like to respond to this important question about graduate student support. I'm tempted to go to Aaron on this.
Yeah, I would just echo what Kim just brought up. I think that reaching out to faculty members, people on your committee, people in your community here at UCR, really pushing them to show up and support and vote on Tuesday, I think is the #1 priority now. I definitely, as a graduate student who came in on the heels of a really intense exodus of Black scholars on UCR's campus, I connect and really relate to the experience of having to sort of, well, not only of isolation, but also of having to like really pull needs to and sort of cobble things together in terms of need. And we've also been in some classes together where I feel like things like this have been discussed, or at least highlighted in the types of things that we were asking in those spaces. But I think that in what I've enjoyed about the sort of visioning of this apartment and why I was so excited to talk about to be a part of this project is that I did not have to hold my tongue when talking about those experiences around isolation and having in the like labor involved in having to go search for things as a graduate student. And those considerations, I think, we're taking seriously, and also mapped onto how we're envisioning collectivity, community, and support as a part of the sort of research development of undergraduate and graduate students. And so, and on the, in addition to that, the committee has made sure to have an open space for students to talk about their need in really concrete terms. I think that there are not enough spaces on campus or even just inside of different sort of structures within the institution. There's not enough spaces for students to be like, this is, y'all are not hitting the mark. And this is what we need to continue to do research to reach our own sort of goals. And so, again, let's talk to the people in your community and network, get them to go vote. And also, this department has taken seriously the experiences of Black graduate and undergraduate students who have really had to do a different type of labor to reach their academic goals here. And I would like to just highlight their particular attention to that in the development of this department as somebody who relates to those experiences of isolation and like alternative forms of labor involved in reaching academic goals. And also, it's great to see.
Thank you for that, Aaron. Joao, go ahead. You raise your hand.
Super briefly, thank you for your question. Number one, we conceive of this department as having a graduate program necessarily. We depend on the collective life of the mind of those of you who are involved in research. And the next step in the building of this project is to craft a graduate program that will make UCR a unique campus offering this kind of program. The other thing that I wanted to mention in line with what Aaron talked about is that from the very beginning, we are thinking about an administrative structure that incorporates graduate students, staff, and community members at all levels, at all levels. Of course, we will take into account all the relevant bylaws on campus, but our concept of shared governance means that it goes beyond faculty to incorporate the ideas and the desires and the suggestions from other relevant and critical actors in this enterprise. So Black Study will be determined by a radically horizontal administrative structure in which graduate students, staff members, community members play a critical role. So thank you for that question.
And thank you for that response. And Joao's point and Aaron's points, everyone, everything that you all have said, it reinvites an actual reading of the proposal, which is not to be taken for granted, because what I've found in some of my interactions with colleagues and some administrators is some of the questions that they raise are out of complete ignorance of the actual content of the proposal. And I'll say just editorially, the proposal is beautifully written. It's incredibly lucid and incisive. It's very engaging. It does not read like a policy proposal. It reads like a vision for something completely different and new. So it's actually pretty exciting to read, people. I will be happy to repost the link to the proposal. I encourage folks to read it. It'll probably answer about 90% or more of some of the questions that you all might have. If it's okay, I would love to raise the question that Anusha wrote in chat. On a similar note, besides attending the Senate meeting on Tuesday, how else might faculty support this new department in the short and long term? I think the emphasis here is the long term. I don't think we've talked about that much yet. Who from the committee would like to take that on?
Not to overuse the expression, but the department proposes a paradigm shift in how we think of ourselves as part of this community, not as competitors, but as collaborators, as individuals who see themselves as part of collectives that have common and often diverging projects, which can nevertheless be subsumed under a common umbrella. So one of the ways that we can help the project is to shift the conversation away from what many of my colleagues mentioned, being the mentality of scarcity and competition, towards one of radical collaboration and common good. So the Department of Black Study has the potential to change the climate on campus, not only for Black people and those who are involved in studies of African topics and diasporic topics, but to all of us. And that, I think that would be one more, maybe more utopian approach to this, but I think it can be very effective.
Thank you for that. Any other members of the committee like to respond to the question about how faculty can support this departmental project, short and long term? If not, I could move to Sarita's question. All right, we can come back to this if anybody has thoughts. Oh, please go ahead, Imani. I'm sorry, I didn't see that. Go ahead, Imani, then I'll go to Sarita's question.
That's okay. It's actually just a small comment, and I'm thinking about in the long term, because the vision includes a doctoral program. The long term for me includes the continued support of the department, the expansion of its vision, and really leaning into those projects that can happen on campus that are collaborative and progressive and activate all of the kind of imagining and thrust that is behind proposal. I feel like the committee has been active in imagining UCR differently. And so for those who share that vision, supporting an ongoing support, an ongoing kind of vocal support of the project is part of changing the landscape of UCR as a whole.
Thank you for that. Thanks for reminding us of that. That's the stakes. Thank you, Imani. Sarita, go ahead and raise your question. Thank you.
So I just wanted to, before raising the question, I just wanted to say, as someone who works in Asian American cultural studies, particularly Filipinx cultural studies, I've always benefited from scholars, particularly of Black feminist thought, Black queer thought. I mean, there's no way I would have stayed in academia or finished my PhD without literally Black studies scholars across all numbers of departments and schools. So I understand what it is to kind of scramble around and kind of put together your own PhD. But there's just no way I would have been able to finish and even go on to in the university. And so that's why I'm here. But I also, really gravitate toward a Department of Black Study, which puts at its center a study of the theories of knowledge, like puts at the center, what are we doing here? What is the role of the university? And what is not working? And what needs to actually really change in order to make it work? So I've reviewed lots of different kinds of programs and proposals, department proposals, whole college proposals. And there's always kind of like that just ignoring the elephant in the room, like, what is it to produce knowledge? What is it to study? And here, what is it to actually start off with the presumption that study is a verb, not a noun? But my question has actually to do with the medical school. I don't know if there are faculty here who took up medical school's invitation, and it defines itself as a community hospital, to actually participate in their interviews of the incoming of applicants to the med school. And I was like, I know nothing basically about anatomy or anything, but I just took up their invitation. It was really, I was kind of blown away by the applicants to the medical school, and the future of the kinds of medical professionals, doctors in particular, who could be coming in through and who are really want to not only study at somewhere like UCR and become a doctor, but actually work in the Inland Empire. I was kind of blown away by that, how they opened up the whole, admissions and interviewing process. So I'm kind of really looking forward, not to the scarcity models, right? The scarcity thinking, but what might it mean to actually really necessarily expand in terms of what healthcare means and what's really kind of special. So I was just kind of curious from the committee if there's, I saw that there's support, from the medicine school, as well as it looked like some sort of, like they need to do some studying on their own as well. But do people, do we see a kind of expansion towards the medical school, especially the community hospital? Foundations that they seem to have there?
So I'd raised my hand a little bit right before Sarita started speaking, but I guess I could say too that in the curriculum that we have law, education, and health, environment, and STEM as part of one of the themes that we would like to have classes and courses on. And I imagine that this would be a space for collaboration. And what I wanted to highlight before was that last week we held a, maybe it was this week, I don't know. We held a session with the College of Natural Sciences, where we talked about what meaningful collaboration would look like across colleges. And there were a lot of suggestions that came up that were more future thinking, right? More future oriented in terms of, incubator projects, ways in which we can go beyond the current budget model, because a lot of the collaboration and the ideas around scarcity are based on some of the more structural issues at UCR. And so we sort of talked about this for about an hour, where we thought through a little bit about what meaningful long-term collaboration could look like. And I think a session like that with Chaz and also with the School of Medicine would probably be a huge bonus for us, or something that we could do, where we could think through some of these issues. Because of course, when we talk about collaboration, which was an issue that was raised in the CNAS panel, is that people are thinking more of representational diversity on their research proposal, et cetera. And we wanted to think beyond that. So I think there's space for us to have such a discussion with the School of Medicine also. But I'll also have other colleagues talk about it.
Go ahead, Joao.
I'm going to be super brief. I just realized that it's 3 to noon, and I think colleagues may want to do closing remarks. It's going to sound like we rehearsed this question and answer, Sarita. I was in the School of Medicine last week. The chair of one of the departments, Dr. Monica Carson, asked our committee to speak with their department. It was very productive. They have several community-oriented projects that center health disparities, that center environmental toxins effects on people's health. And we imagined joint curricula, joint activities. We thought about joint graduate students in both departments. We thought about joint initiatives with surrounding communities. So absolutely, this is one example of what can be duplicated and multiplied with other departments, with other units. So thank you for that question.
Hey, thank you for the questions, everyone. Alvoris, please go ahead.
I'll be brief also. I think Sarita's question and observation is very, very important and sometimes easy to overlook. So I'll make 2 points. When we had a discussion in an open forum with some folks in natural sciences and some folks that I knew from the medical school, the very way that we talked about diversity, not as about bodies, a mere inclusion, but as epistemologies, of ways of knowing, being, and doing. And so since they want to be here in the Inland Empire, it dawned upon them, okay, this is how we can think about diversity in a way that makes it useful for us in terms of trying to get people to stay here. So if you're going to do that, you need to know that the people who live here is not just about difference. It's about knowing, which takes us back to the notion of epistemology, which is vitally important because we all know here, but many people don't think about is that whether one is Asian, whether one is Persian, African-American, whatever the case may be, it gets reduced to mere difference and not epistemology, which is that the notion that we really don't know anything because, and this is where fungibility comes in, right? Is that anyone with the right skin color can, or the right look, can do what is being done at that university. So people aren't retained, students aren't valued, the work isn't valued because it seems merely about difference, not epistemology. So any notion of Blacks, of any study that understands these notions of being epistemic is vitally, vitally important in terms of how we study, with whom we study, and how we view study. And I think that what makes Black study as a verb vitally, vitally important.
Beautiful. And, I can't think of a better way to close this session out. Thank you for the questions, everybody. Thank you for being so attentive. Thank you for absorbing the stakes of this vote and this process that we're really just starting. And I can't think of a better way to close us out than to ask our good colleague and BSI committee member, Sage, to offer maybe some closing comments.
I'll be be brief with you. I wanted to thank everyone for being here. We'd like to thank everyone as a committee for your presence and for your presences throughout the process of creating this pre-proposal. For those of you who have helped and circulated petitions and folks who have shown up for town hall after town hall, who have lent your advice and your knowledge of governance and the histories, the intersecting histories that have been a part of our knowledge building and in this process. We thank you for that. We have one more stretch for this moment. There's another, right? The future of this will continue, but as we're looking into next week, we ask you to continue your energies with us and show up to the meeting and get a friend or two, a colleague or two to be present with you so that we can continue to also show up in a full community. We've spoken today about a lot of the things that we know, which are vast, and as a future leaning initiative, there's a lot that we're excited about co-creating together. So what you've heard are robust seeds. And as we're moving into the next moment, we are looking for a continued collective effort in growing what our next is like. So not just about Black aliveness tomorrow, but about the construction of that future. So thank you all for your presence. Thank you so much, Dylan and CIS, for hosting us with a great deal of gratitude.
Appreciation to all of you. Appreciation to the BSI committee and to everyone who came through. Appreciate that, everybody. See you Tuesday, folks.